You know, I'm not a great believer in the good old days. Were things really better 50 years ago? Depends on your point of view, of course, but there have been many benefits since then. Advances in medicine, safer and more comfortable cars, and most of us wouldn't want to give up our smartphones. However, I think it is true to say that life was simpler then. We had TV and radio, but no internet, and so we weren't bombarded with information 24 hours a day. Conspiracy theories weren't such a big thing back then, and manipulation of photos was much more difficult. So you tended to believe what you saw. So where am I headed with this? To a straightforward question. Who can you trust? Christians will put God at the top of the list, and most people will include some family members and one or two friends. We might also add doctors, bus drivers, even teachers, though I suspect that most politicians wouldn't feature too highly. We wouldn't leave the house if we didn't put our trust in certain things. That cars will stay on the roads, that we can go in a shop and buy food and so on. We tend to put our trust in people and things that we have found to be reliable over quite a long period of time. However, this isn't a perfect system, and sometimes we put our trust in somebody or something that lets us down or even deliberately betrays us, and the results can be devastating. An example of this is the way that many people are increasingly turning to the internet for advice about their health. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you do have to be careful to check where the advice is coming from. Is it from a trusted source, like the NHS? Or is it from some influencer who is making money out of selling their own range of products? If you're not sure, you should be checking several sources, but not everyone does that. We may just end up wasting our money, but we could also end up taking some dangerous medication that will harm us. We need to be just as careful when it comes to our faith. Unfortunately, we can't take everything at face value, but must be aware that there are people who deliberately try to manipulate others through religion. Jesus put it like this in Matthew chapter 7, beginning to read at verse 15. Be on your guard against false prophets. They come to you looking like sheep on the outside, but on the inside they are really like wild wolves. This makes me think of the old fairy tale, Little Red Riding Hood, where the big bad wolf dresses up like a familiar person, the grandma, in order to deceive. The point is that it isn't always obvious who we can trust. Many people say they are Christians, and they may be charismatic, influential speakers, but we have to look beyond the words. Jesus goes on in verses 16 and 17. You will know them by what they do. Thorn bushes do not bear grapes, and briars do not bear figs. A healthy tree bears good fruit, but a poor tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a poor tree cannot bear good fruit. So we have to look at what people do, not just what they say. In Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, it tells us that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So these have to be the kinds of qualities that we look for in people that we are going to trust, especially Christian leaders, speakers, and influencers. Now, of course, nobody is perfect, but if the Holy Spirit is at work in our lives, these are the kinds of things that we should all be developing. In Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 to 40, Jesus said, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the most important commandment. The second most important commandment is like it. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. The whole law of Moses and the teachings of the prophets depend on these two commandments. This is another indicator about whom we should trust. Sadly, the Christian faith has sometimes been corrupted by things like money, sex, and power. If, for example, love of money becomes more important than love of God, then it can have a very negative effect. I am always skeptical of people who are supposed to be preaching the gospel, have a very luxurious lifestyle. We should also remember the importance of loving your neighbour, whoever they are and wherever they come from, and ask ourselves whether the message that is being preached supports that. So where does this leave us? Above all, we can trust God. He doesn't change and is completely reliable. However, when it comes to people, we have to be a lot more careful. And as Jesus said, watch out for the wolves in sheep's clothing. I hope you have a good week.